In this video, I'm going to teach you how to use the inverse trig functions. Now what you need to keep in mind is the original trig functions. Sine of an angle is equal to opposite over the hypotenuse. The cosine of an angle is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse again. And finally, the tangent of an angle equals the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. The time we'd use inverse trig functions is when we are looking for an angle. Let's look at some examples here. In our first example, again, these are always right triangles. We are given a side of 3 and 4. What we want to know is what is angle B. Now compared to angle B, 4 is the opposite side, 3 is the adjacent side. We know that because this side right here is the hypotenuse. So we have to ask ourselves which function uses opposite and adjacent. Looking back at our sheet over here, we see that our tangent function uses opposite and adjacent. So we know that tangent of B, whatever that is, equals opposite over adjacent, which is 4 over 3. Now that doesn't help us figure out what B is until we use this inverse function. So what that looks like is tan with a little -1 there. Now depending on what type of calculator you have, if it's a calculator on your phone, what you're going to want to do is type this 4/3 in first, and then type in your tan -1, or your inverse tangent. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. On my calculator here, I'll do 4 divided by 3. And then what I need to do is, I have this scientific calculator sideways there, so I'm going to hit second. There's my inverse tangent, so my angle would be 53.1 degrees. Let's take a peek at another problem here. In this problem, let's look for angle R, except let's say that we're given this side right here is 7 and this side is 10. Well, compared to R, 7 is our opposite and 10 is our hypotenuse. So again, we have to look backwards on our other sheet to find out which one is opposite and hypotenuse. Well, that's going to be our sine function. So we're going to say sine of R equals our opposite over our hypotenuse. So our opposite is 7, our hypotenuse is 10. Again, we're looking for an angle here, so we need to say inverse sine of 7 over 10. Again, I'm going to come back to my calculator. I'm going to type 7 divided by 10 first. And then I already have that second button pushed, and I want to use inverse sine this time. So my angle this time is 44.43 degrees. Let's look at a third example. This time let's look for angle A, except this time we're given this side is 11 and this side is 20. We have to figure out which sides these are. Compared to A, 11 is the adjacent, 20 is the hypotenuse. We have to ask ourselves which function uses the adjacent and hypotenuse. Looking back at our other sheet, we see that the cosine function uses adjacent and hypotenuse. the way you set that up is you're going to say cosine of A equals 11 over 20, because we need our adjacent divided by our hypotenuse. And again, we're looking for an angle measure here, so we can't just type it in like this. We have to say inverse cosine of 11 over 20. So what I'm going to do is come back to my calculator here. And I'm going to type in 11 divided by 20 first. Again, I have my second button pushed, and I'm looking for inverse cosine this time. My angle measure is 56.6 degrees. So recapping our lesson here, what you need to do first is, based on your angle, you need to decide which sides you're given. If you're given adjacent and opposite, you use tangent. If you're given opposite and hypotenuse, you use sine. If you're given adjacent and hypotenuse, you would use cosine. Let's look at a fourth example here. Compared to angle B now. Let's say we're given, this time we're given all three sides. Now, we know 4 is our opposite, 3 is our adjacent, and 5 is our hypotenuse. The really neat thing about this situation is when you're given all three, you can choose which function you'd like to use. So, if you wanted to use sine, you'd say sine of B equals, sine is opposite over adjacent, or hypotenuse, so it's 4 over 5. To solve that side, you'd have to say inverse sine of 4 over 5. If you wanted to use cosine, you would use adjacent over hypotenuse. And to solve for the angle, you'd use inverse cosine of 3 over 5. And if you wanted to use tangent, that would be opposite over adjacent. In order to solve the angle, again, you're looking for an angle, you use inverse functions. Now, the important thing to note here is that no matter which way you type this in, which one you choose, you're going to get the same answer. So let's prove it. We want to do inverse sine of 4/5. So 4 divided by 5, 0.8. We're going to do inverse sine. That's going to be 53 degrees. Let's try the inverse cosine now. So we're going to go 3 divided by 5. Inverse cosine this time. Look what happens. 53 degrees again. And let's try this one more time with our tangent. We're going to try 4 divided by 3. And then we're going to